Really well. Speeds.
All right, roll one, scene 104, take one.
Okay, so first, can you just introduce yourself like we just met?
Oh, okay. My name is Richard Samuels. I am with the Weekend program, subsidiary of my Growing Indie, my organization, and we work with 18 to 26-year-old young African American males and trying to get them off drugs, get them employed, and get them some career experience so that they can have a better life than I had.
So tell me a little bit about your life. What got you into helping people now?
Well, I spent 26 years in the prison system. Unfortunately, growing up, my mom drugged me and my sister to church. We were in church so much that, whether it was choir rehearsal, whether it was just Sunday school, all of those things, it seemed like we were always in church. And I remember thinking, the sooner I can make my own decisions and not have to go to church, that would be the first thing that I would do, is just not go. Unfortunately, that came faster than I realized. And so once I had that opportunity to choose, of course, I chose the streets instead of going back to church and staying into that mode that my mom was trying to put into me. In the streets, trying to survive, theft is an automatic. You start stealing things in order to have things. Theft turned into robbing, robbing turned into stabbing, stabbing turned into shooting, and that was my first introduction to prison. So going to prison as a young man, I often feel like I am a crime and punishment expert. I've been in prison. I was in prison in the 70s. I was in prison in the 80s. I was in prison in the 90s. I was in prison in the first portion of the 2000s. And I was in prison from 2010 to 2014. And so it was interesting. What I finally realized was I was the only common denominator. And my understanding of right and wrong had been skewed. The last time, in 2006, I was 46 years old, and they'd given me a 25-year prison sentence. And so at that point, I didn't know what else to do. I turned spiritual and said, hey, this is the only thing that I haven't tried. And so, God, if you will give me an opportunity to get out and change my life, then I will do that. And my prayers were answered. However, what a lot of people don't understand is, when you're talking about answered prayers, you think it's immediate, and it's usually not. And so I still had, back then, 25 years meant 25 years, 5 years suspended, 20 do 10. So I basically had 10 years in front of me when I decided to throw my hands up and say, hey, I apologize, Coming to that reality, I had to change while I was incarcerated. And that's what I did. I had no work ethic whatsoever. So what I did was I took the worst of the worst jobs you can have in prison, which is cleaning the bathrooms. Nobody cares about what happens in the bathrooms in prison because they assume, well, this is the police's stuff, And so they just trash it. So being that person who was responsible for that, and of course, you have to understand that I had been in prison several times before. I had a reputation. And so people were like, well, who's this big black bald-headed guy, the tough guy, cleaning toilets? You know what I mean? And so it humbled me. It gave me an opportunity to realize and understand what humility meant. Doing that and then going on for an associate's and a bachelor's degree gave me a time cut and got me out in 2014. So coming home, was a great thing for me.
So tell me about a little bit more about what got you into prison. So you said it just escalated from one thing to another
Yes.
because of addiction?
Well, absolutely. In the heaviest throes of my drug addiction, I didn't care about anybody else. All I cared about was getting high. And that was more so because I didn't like who I saw in the mirror. And that's something that you come to after a while. You realize why you're doing the drugs. But that's what it was. I would, rob people, steal, kick in the door of the dope man, of course, and after a while you realize, well, dang, I'm doing all this. Why don't I just go to the source? And so that's what I started doing. And unfortunately, I'm lucky I'm still here because so many times that I could have died by doing it that way. That took me back to these 4 that recently got killed for that very reason. Someone kicking the door in and shooting them and killing them. The addiction was bad. I didn't care about anybody else's life. I didn't care about my life. I didn't care about anything. And unfortunately, that is what's happening to so many of our young people today. They have so many things on their plate that the previous generation did not have. We think about the time when we could leave our doors unlocked. That time is long gone. But there are so many reasons for that, in terms of poverty, in terms of life experiences. And like I tell everyone, drug addiction is a singular thing that is different for everyone. There are different reasons why you start to use drugs. And for some, it's abuse, some of it's mental, some of it's physical, but a lot of it is just, I'm just trying to cope to get through the day. Because if my mom is on crack, or my father is on crack, or my father's not there, and my mother is an addict, who's raising me? And so those are some of the questions that I think society needs to really focus on in this attempt to try and figure out what it is that we're doing wrong in terms of our young people being so violent, having no conscience. There are just so many things that we need to really look at.
What about the challenges that you're seeing with the people you're helping and getting them into a path of normalcy? How do you help them?
Well, the biggest help that I provide is consistency. No one ever talks about that. First and foremost, you can't come into a person's life who's using drugs or who's doing wrong or who's just trying to survive and think that you can impart information to them that's going to make them change in a heartbeat. Just isn't going to happen. You have to show up day after day after day after day, and you have to be that individual that they build a trust and a bond with. Once they trust you, once they believe that, well, this guy's not going anywhere, because trust and believe, they challenge me every group that I have. They're like, well, what do you care about us? And why are you here? And why do you keep coming back? And it's like, and then of course I share my story with them. And they're like, really? And they usually either half believe it or don't believe it at all. And they're waiting for that time when I don't come back, but I keep showing up. And then all of a sudden I have extended family, because that's what they've been looking for all along. Everyone in the world wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be cared for. And what I've come to understand is that these young people are just like everybody else. They're just looking for somebody to care about them. And when they find that someone is going to come back day after day after day and impart wisdom and pour love into them, to see the change in them just because they know somebody's there for them is just an amazing thing. Had a wonderful experience on Valentine's Day. Most of my guys didn't even know how to tie a tie. We took them to Success Wear, which is run by St. Vincent's, formerly known as Danny's Closet. And they pass out clothes for people who are going to interviews and things like that. And we called them and said, hey, we've got guys that have never been able to take their girls out on dates and, with the suit and tie and all of that, and we want to dress them up. And they said, okay. And so it was just great. A lady named Michelle came and sized the guys. And I mean, me standing there, showing them how to tie a tie and all of that stuff. I mean, just to see the joy on their faces was just magnificent. It gave me a sense of accomplishment because I knew what it felt like to feel worthless and then to have someone care about you. I've had a few mentors. When I first came home from prison, there was a guy called Harold Bell. He had a radio station. And he said, man, you should tell people your story. And I was like, man, I don't have time for that. You know, I'm home. I'm trying to enjoy myself. I need to get a job. You know, I've got so many other things to do. And he said, you know, what about giving back to the community? And I was like, giving what back? You know, I'm trying to get my life back, you know. And he was like, no. He said, now, he said, there's something about you that I see, and I think that you have leadership qualities. And I was like, okay, you know. And so he said, one of the main qualities of a leader is giving back. It's not about you. And gave me a book which changed my life, The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. The first 4 words in that book, in that chapter, was it's not about you. And that's when I learned that it was not about me, it was what I had to give and what I had to offer. And it changed the way I looked at all of the negative things that had happened to me in my life. All of the prison time, all of the abuse, all of the drug addictions, all of the negative things that I went through. What I realized is I was being prepared and educated for what my purpose really was, which is to give back to my community. And so that's what I do now. I'm just thrilled to be able to do that. I guess maybe a month or so of having been out, I was invited to the juvenile center, went down there, talked to some people, and they, you know, said, hey, you know, you can come back all you want, you know. They loved what I had to say. They loved the spirit with which I said it. Because it wasn't a situation where I was blaming the world, where I was feeling sorry for myself. You know, I took full responsibility for everything that I had done. And I think that's very important, especially for those in the throes of drug addiction or coming from incarceration. You have to own the things, the bad things that happened in your life in order for you to really honestly share the good things. And so now that's my mission, to just constantly share the best parts of me. As I continue to search for the best parts of myself. Truth and transparency is a big deal. And so being able to share with the young people that I work with on a daily basis with the WeCamp program is a big deal for me. So
That's great.
I'm not letting you talk, so
No,
I'm listening.
No, I'm being quiet so I can hear you. No, that's awesome. So you've come out, I mean, on the other side.
Yes,
And I know you're a man of faith.
yes.
So is there anything else that you could say to someone who is struggling? What would help them?
Well, yes, I definitely find someone to talk to. That was a big thing for me. When I came home, I had no one to talk to. I went to PACE. A lot of people have heard about PACE, but what they don't know about PACE is that my counselor was Shauna Majors. Shauna Majors is now with the mayor's office doing the crime reduction stuff. And, you know, Shauna used to pour into me and tell me, you know, that, you know, the potential that she saw in me and all of this type of stuff, you know. And so I was able to sit down with her. There were a couple of other people, John Coco, who's with Step Up, some of the other organizations around town in Indianapolis here. And people just allowed me to get it off of me, which is something that I really needed, the burden of the negativity of my life, which was prison, drug addiction, you know, all of the bad stuff. And so being able to get that off me, now I was brand new and I was able to look at life in a different vein. And so one of the most important things that I can stress to anyone who is trying to change their life, whether it be drug addiction, whether it be reentry or reincarceration, is to get a library card. Nobody talks about the library, but the library is a place where you can start over. Because if you've got a library card, you have access to information that everybody has. I mean, the library, I was introduced to books and CDs and videos, and it was free. I didn't need to have a computer. I didn't need to have all of these things. And when I got that library card, it opened the world to me. I know that sounds like a pitch for the library, but it really did. The library really helped save me. And it put me on the path to, okay, well, Of course, now, and the thing that people don't understand is when you're in and out of prison for 26 years, when I came home, one of the funniest things that happened to me was, okay, people were happy that I was home, and so they were trying to figure out, what kind of gifts to give me and all that stuff, right? And so we're in a room, and I've got my little family around me, and so all of a sudden I hear this music. I'm like, oh man, that's great, that's great. Somebody turned the radio off because we're trying to do something over here. And they said, that's not the radio, that's your ringtone. I had no idea that technology had passed me by to the point where I was expecting a ringing sound from my phone. I didn't realize that it had advanced to the fact that you could do ringtones and you could have any of your favorite songs on there and all. So I was afraid of technology when I first came home. And so the library just changed it for me because I could go in and say, I want to learn about the internet. I want to learn about this. I want to learn about that. And that's what it did. It provided that opportunity for me to learn about those things and get better at them. So. Yeah, just some of the things that people really don't consider when you're talking about reentry, when you're talking about getting back on track. I think that, there's really not enough transparency. Everybody's trying to make money. And when it comes to addictions, when it comes to reentry, that's unfortunate because we have so many organizations out here who are more worried about the administrative costs. That the money that they're being given by the government doesn't get to trickle down to those who really need it. And being part of that echelon right now in terms of understanding not-for-profits and how they work, I'm hoping that our communities change. I remember when I was telling you about my mom dragging me to church and stuff, I remember after church, you used to be able to go downstairs in the basement of the church and get a $2 dinner. Churches used to feed. Now churches are big business. Things have changed. And so I just hope that we get back to community. I hope that we get back to loving one another as just individuals. This is not a lot of people try to say that it's a racial issue, it's a black and white issue, and it's really just people struggling, and I think it's a green issue, whether you have, because we've kind of like lost the middle portion of the workforce. There's no longer poverty, middle class, and wealth. Now it's wealth and poverty, and it's shrinking every day. And so we've got to get back to being able to help one another and love one another and understand that anything is possible when the community comes together and makes their minds up that, we need to change something and make some different things happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is